Will separation save your marriage? It's almost a cliche now that people will say, we need to separate for a time. Or even someone you trust, like a therapist, might suggest that if you want to save your marriage, that you undergo a trial separation. And the numbers on these trial separations are abysmal. And so I want to give you an idea of what to expect and some of the pitfalls if you decide to separate and you're wanting to save your marriage. Number one is that when a couple separates, when there's marital crisis, there's conflict, there's strife, they get relief because they're out of the conflict. They're out of the situation. And so they can breathe a sigh of relief. Things seem easier and they don't have to actually do the work of improving the relationship. Instead, it's almost the same as quitting. Now, there are some situations, if someone's in danger, if someone is abusive, then yes, separation makes sense. And that's not the situation that I'm talking about. That sense of relief can cause a lot of problems because why would someone want to leave feeling relieved, feeling ease, feeling an escape from the issues? Why would they want to leave that to go back into conflict, to go back into discussing what they need to discuss to make the relationship better? Separation can actually make things a lot more difficult. Number two is that it does limit your interactions with this person to those issues and those negatives. A lot of people will separate and then they'll meet once a week for therapy, or they'll meet once a month or whatever it is. And it seems like that the only times they have together are when they are going through conflict and they're going through the issues and they're basically involving themselves in a chaperoned fight. I remember a woman coming to me and she was separated from her husband. And she said that they only saw each other one time each week. And that was for a therapy session. And she said that at the therapy session, all we did was go through the issues. And so basically, whenever we would meet, we would be going through the negatives, trying to solve something and end up fighting. And there was nothing positive going on. And so I actually suggested that the two of them take a break from counseling if he agreed to it, and that they would replace that weekly meeting with a lunch or a coffee date where the rules were no talk of issues. And they were only allowed to talk about the positives. They could tell a joke, they could tell a story, they could talk about their children, what's going on with them, but they could not go into those issues because they weren't ready. Healing needs to take place before you can actually withstand going through the issues. There has to be some healing. I'm not saying that there has to be complete healing, but there has to be some in order to handle those, or else you're just fighting and actually making things worse to the point that the other person can become exasperated and they don't want to try anymore. It's a terrible situation to be in if you're wanting to save your marriage. Before I get to number three, get my free mini course on saving a marriage in crisis. It's a powerful course and you can get it for free by going to the address that's in the description below, or you can go to myexpatcoach.com and it's under the marriage tab. Number three, in answering the question, will separation save my marriage? Separation can actually cause a feeling of being single. It's almost like a mini divorce. And so when I hear people say, we're going to do a trial separation, basically it's, let's see what it feels like to be apart. And the rules can get very gray. A lot of times people will act like they are single when they're separated. They'll go out to clubs, they'll go to parties, they'll socialize, they'll start to have some fun. And then you're faced with a similar situation to someone who does not have to interact with the person that they're having these issues with. And it's actually a lot easier. It actually seems like fun. And the person can start to think, well, why would I want to go back to that when there's all these issues and all this conflict when I could start over with someone? And it's a lot of fun going out and pretending like I'm single. And then on top of that, what if something happens and another person is now in the picture? You've just made the problem even worse if that wasn't the case before. And don't think that it's going to be simpler or easier or clearer in your situation, because that's what a lot of people think, and it does not turn out to be that way. In fact, oftentimes one person will become very hurt at the other person because they just seem like they don't even want to try anymore, and that they will break any rules that were established, because why wouldn't they? It feels like they're single. They're not having to interact with this person as though they are married. And it's a different situation than what you think it is if you're trying to save your relationship, because it actually puts you in the worst position possible if you want to save your marriage. Number four is that separation can legally hurt you. And you're going to need to speak to a lawyer about this. And I'm not a lawyer and I'm not giving legal advice, but I am telling you that I have seen separations make it to where the person who was not in the house anymore, maybe one of them got an apartment during the separation and they were away from the children. Now they set up something called precedence, which is where the person was away from their kids and apparently it was okay. And so the courts or a judge will interpret that as your intentions and your desire and what's important to you. And they can actually use it to either have less time with you and the kids, or they affect custody. It's pretty bad. So be careful. Talk to a lawyer. Make sure you're protected if you're thinking about separation. But again, I encourage you, if you want to save your marriage, that you don't separate, that you stay with this person if you're not in danger and you attempt to rebuild. And that doesn't always mean you go through the issues, because that's really difficult. A lot of times you need to have some of that healing where you just limit it to positives, you make things light, and you do some things like you did in the beginning of the relationship. And I get into that a lot more in my free mini course on saving marriages that you can get at myexpatcoach.com under the marriage tab. Number 5 is that if you have children, it's really destabilizing. It's really difficult when one of their parents suddenly just leaves them to go live somewhere else, because there are other people involved. That's what makes marriage separation and marriage issues so difficult, is that they often involve other people who are dependent, who need the nurturing and the parenting from both of you. And now this person has left the house. And even if you tell them, you sit them down and you do the cliche thing of mom and dad are going to do this and that kind of thing, but we love you very much, it's still very difficult because they want both parents in the home. And many parents have come to me and talked about how difficult and confusing it has been for their children when one of them leaves, and that no matter how much they said, it remained difficult. And it was something that they wished they could have not done, that they could have gone back in time and changed. And so I don't want that for you. And so I'm telling you this hopefully before you do it, because a lot of people go into this thinking we will be different, we can handle this differently, it won't impact the kids like it does other kids. But it does. And so be very careful before you separate, because there's a lot more than just getting a break or getting some time apart. The idea that healing can take place when you're not interacting with each other is theoretical at best. And there's a lot of evidence that says that that's not the route to go. And I wish that I could unhear some of the conversations I've had with people who have separated and what it's done to their children, what it's done to their marriage that was already struggling, and how it lowered their chances and made things much more difficult to try to reunite and to reignite the relationship. Be sure to get information on my free mini course at myexpatcoach.com under the marriage tab. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for watching.